Thank you so much for joining us today for our very last BMI event of the academic year. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sabrina Shie, and I have been the live events graduate assistant with Black Mountain Institute for this year. Today, I have the honor of introducing our moderator, Kim Foster, and our guest of honor tonight, Shearing Fellow Monica Macansantos. Woo! But first, for making this event possible, BMI would like to thank its supporters, Beverly Rogers, Miriam Shearing, and the Rogers Foundation. So tonight, we are gathered here to celebrate the official book launch for Monica's essay collection, Returning to My Father's Kitchen, published by Northwestern University Press / Curbstone Books. For this event, we're going to start off with Monica reading an excerpt from her collection, followed by a conversation between Kim and Monica, and then we'll end the night with questions from the audience. So without further ado, please take a moment to silence your cell phones, and I'd like you all to join me in acknowledging the land that this reading takes place upon. The University of Nevada, Las Vegas wishes to acknowledge and honor the indigenous communities of this region and recognize that we are situated on the traditional homelands of the Nuwu Southern Paiute people. We offer gratitude for the land itself, for those who have stewarded it for generations, and for the opportunity to study, learn, work, and be in community with this land. We encourage everyone in this space to engage in continued learning about the indigenous peoples who work and live on this land since time immemorial, including the Las Vegas Paiute tribe and the Mawapa Band of Paiutes. So tonight we'll have the wonderful Kim Foster moderating the conversation. She is a James Beard award-winning writer and author of The Meth Lunches, Food and Longing in an American City with St. Martin's Press, which is about food at the intersection of mental illness, family separation, poverty, addiction, trauma, and incarceration. Before that, in New York City, she was an assistant professor of women and gender studies at Pace University. Kim is currently writing weekly essays at her newsletter, The Great Perhaps, on Substack, which explores the last third of our lives. And now to introduce Monica. Monica Macansantos is currently a Shearing Fellow with the Black Mountain Institute and was recently named the 2025 Marguerite and Lamar Smith Fellow with the Carson McCullers Center in Columbus, Georgia. She is the She is the author of the essay collection Returning to My Father's Kitchen and the story collection Love and Other Rituals. Her recent honors include fellowships from Monson Arts, the Story Knife Writers Retreat, and the iPark Foundation, among other residency programs. She holds an MFA from the University of Texas at Austin, Michener Center for Writers, and a PhD from Victoria University of Wellington in New Zealand. In addition to all of her amazing achievements, I just wanted to highlight how much Monica has done for the Las Vegas community during her time here. She not only hosted Kwentuhan at Chikahan, a Las Vegas Filipino book club, but also she brought in so many amazing Filipino writers to come speak and read, including Grace Talusan, Mia Alvar, Oliver de la Paz, Cherry Lusai, and really she fostered an amazing community space for so many readers and writers, many of whom are in the audience right now. And I just wanted to thank her for being such an inspiration during her time here. Okay, without further ado, please welcome Monica.
Thank you, Sabrina, for that lovely introduction. And thank you to all of you for coming out on this beautiful evening. I'm going to miss this community. Sorry. Anyway, I'm going to read from the third essay in this collection, Becoming a Writer, The Silences We Write Against. Yes. Love that one. Thank you. My father was many things when I was growing up in America, but I had to be told, before I was aware of it, that he was also a writer. A child only knows the obvious. that her father cooks all her meals, walks her to the bus stop on a school day, takes her to the library when she wants to check out a new book, reads to her as she falls asleep, watches Sesame Street with her, works at a high school cafeteria. While I lay on my stomach in our apartment's living room, watching TV, I sometimes noticed that he sat at the kitchen table, scribbling sentences in battered spiral notebooks. But I knew too little to assign meaning to this. Like much of my father's life, the hours he spent with his notebooks went unexplained. I must have said something about my father, made a simplistic generalization of the roles he played in my life. Because one day he brought me to my parents' bedroom and pulled out a briefcase from his desk drawer. I remember staring at the handle as he opened the briefcase, for it had been gnawed at, exposing the sticky rubber underneath its plastic coating. We purchased almost everything we owned from yard sales. Inside the briefcase were two rolled certificates. He undid the ribbon that held the first one and said, "Back in our home country, I was recognized as a writer. Here is the highest award a writer can win in the Philippines." It was a Palanca Award he had won for a collection of English language poetry in 1989, 2 years after I was born and a year before we left for America. He enrolled another certificate on which his name was printed. It was another Palanca Award, a second prize for a collection of poems. It's been a struggle for me to make a name for myself here, but I wanted you to know that I was able to do that back home, he said, allowing me to spread the certificates on my lap. As I handed them back to him, I asked myself why we had come to America, why my father had to leave behind the people who recognized who he really was, who gave him prizes for all those hours spent laboring quietly over his notebooks. I had only vague memories of the Philippines, having been brought to America at the age of 3. But my parents constantly reminded me that the Philippines was our home and that we'd someday return. "You had playmates there," my father said, "and if you meet them again, they'll speak to you in Tagalog, the language you were beginning to learn before we moved away." In the Philippines, we have a female president, a kind and brave woman who helped us win back our freedoms from an evil man named Marcos. "It's a better place now, and we'll be back as soon as your mother finishes what she needs to do." The more my father spoke about the Philippines, the more it came to represent a promised land, a place to which I could escape from the cruelties of America and the adult world. In the Philippines, I wouldn't be placed in detention by my teachers without explanation, wouldn't be a primary suspect when a desk was vandalized or a ruler snapped in two. I imagined myself playing the lead in a school play in the Philippines, not just a supporting role like a villain's minion or a tree. If the Philippines was a place where my father won prizes for his poems, surely it was also a place where I would belong. Our time to return finally came when my mother defended her dissertation and earned her PhD in mathematics from the University of Delaware. My optimism nearly matched my father's sense of relief as we sold our belongings, packed the possessions we couldn't part with in balikbayan boxes, and bade farewell to my parents' friends, many of whom were Filipino. At farewell parties, I'd hear them ask my parents in worried tones if they thought I'd be able to adjust to quote unquote life back home once we returned. Did one ever have to adjust to one's home? I asked myself. But my father was insistent. America wasn't our home. We didn't belong here. We landed in Manila in November 1995, 3 days before Super Typhoon Rosing made landfall in Manila Bay and nearly blew out the bay window in my aunt's living room. The air was as thick as water when we landed, and my head swam in the heat as we walked down the tarmac. The ground I walked on, holding my mother's hand tightly, didn't feel solid enough. We had flown over the waters of the Pacific for what felt like an eternity, and even if I was now walking on solid ground, it didn't feel like we had landed. The inside of the airport was dingy and run down. Brown men with dark hair like mine barked orders at each other in a harsh alien tongue as they hauled luggage onto wooden platforms for us to claim. My aunt and cousin met us outside the airport, where everything seemed damp. The hot air, my cousin's sweat stained t shirt, the palm trees that dotted the center islands of streets, fronds gleaming with wetness. A man with a soothing American drawl spoke on the radio when we arrived at my aunt's apartment in Malate, and I learned from my aunt that the voice on the radio belonged to my uncle. As a cousin handed me a Hershey's chocolate bar, my uncle announced on air that his wife's sister and husband, as well as their daughter Monica, had just landed in the country. He then put on the song, Welcome Back. When my uncle returned from his shift at the radio station later that evening, I couldn't believe that this small, brown, gray-haired man was the same person who spoke in a perfect American accent on the airwaves. But when he opened his mouth, the familiar sounds of America tumbled forth from his lips, reassuring me that the United States wasn't too far away and that the Philippines wasn't such a dangerous, unfamiliar place. I immediately warmed up to my uncle because he sounded like me and told jokes I understood. I learned later that he had received elocution lessons from the Maryknoll nuns who taught at the exclusive Catholic school he had attended as a boy in Baguio. When I think about him now, I see him as a person who reminded me of America, the land where I'd spent my formative years and whose company allowed me to acknowledge the uneasiness I felt back in the land my parents called home. My parents did not warn me about the poverty I'd see on the streets of Manila when we departed Malate 4 days later for the city of Baguio. Instead of apologizing for the frantic crowds fighting for space in rickety jeeps and buses, my father pointed out the rice paddies that surrounded us as soon as we escaped the capital in a van my aunt had rented for us. Our hometown was in the mountains, and as we drove up the 2-lane highway that snaked its way through the Cordillera mountain range, the air in the van grew thinner and a comfortable chill set in. Tall pine trees with scraggly branches replaced the squat, leafy trees of the lowlands. In the days that followed, I accompanied my parents as they revisited familiar haunts. We weren't on the move anymore, and they couldn't afford to reject what they saw. Like them, I had to take the Philippines for what it was. If someone blocked the sidewalk with their potted plants or sari-sari stall, we walked on the narrow street, risking being sideswiped by a car. There was nothing else we could do. This was our country. Things only got worse when I re-entered the 3rd grade in the private Philippine school. It was hard enough that my classmates bullied me in a language I couldn't understand. Nothing was explained to me. Lessons were meant to be memorized, not understood. Our teachers tested us for our ability to remember certain terms chosen from chapters in textbooks, and they didn't seem to care whether we understood these chapters or not. I struggled academically, my grades plummeting. My grades only began to rise again in 4th grade when I taught myself to learn by rote. It didn't matter whether I understood Charlotte's Web or not, and it was better if I didn't waste my time trying to dwell on what the book was about. As long as I remembered exactly what the gander told Wilbur the pig when Wilbur tried to spin a web with a piece of string, I'd get a passing grade. My teacher wasn't interested in what I thought about the scene. She never asked what I thought about anything. And I'll end there. Thank you.
Oh my God, that was so great. Hi, everybody. I wanted to just start this talk by saying how much I enjoyed Monica's storytelling. I'm known as a food writer, and so the appeal, probably feels obvious. There's so many connections to food and, by extension, love in this book. But for me, the most powerful part was how I got to know and love her father. And I truly feel like if I don't know him, I know so much about him, how he feels. The way he fortified her in the world with his chicken adobo so she'd always be able to eat. And that reminded me of my own father, who gave me $1 and had me put it in my wallet so that I'd never be broke. And it's a little like how I taught my adult daughters to make eggs so that when they were out in the world, they'd be able to make a cheat meal for themselves. What Monica taps into is the long arm of family stretched around us. The way our parents form us, and then we leave them, and then they leave us. And Monica writes about what remains. And that's what makes this book really, really special. And so it's my pleasure to help Monica launch her book tonight. Welcome to your fabulous Vegas book launch.
Thank you.
I want to start with the first essay, Returning to My Father's Kitchen, because it introduces us to your father. And I want his cooking, his kitchen life with the family. I love that you describe him painstakingly cutting up the tiny calamansi and dealing with the seeds and the juices instead of just throwing vinegar into the pot, which is what a lot of cooks would do. And to me, it said something about who he was and what he cared about. And then also he had this relationship cooking, not just with you, but with another artist in the Philippines. And I'd love it if you could talk about that and just give us a picture of him in the kitchen and the things that he loved to do.
Yeah, so thank you, Kim, for that lovely reading of my work. And thank you again, everyone, for coming. So my father was the kind of person and the kind of father who did not like cutting corners. He took fathering so seriously. Like he was the person who taught me how to wash my hands properly so that I'd get between my fingers. Like other people would be like, "Oh, just wash your hands." Like, and then
I kind of love that.
yeah, and also once I brushed my teeth and he thought that it was like too quick. Like hadn't spent enough time brushing my teeth. So he's like, you go back and brush your teeth. You didn't brush your teeth. I was like, I brushed my teeth. And he's like, you didn't spend enough time. Go back and brush your teeth. So he was that kind of father, and he was also like this with other people. So as a professor of literature in Baguio, he took his work so seriously. He tried to make sure that his students, even if they were falling asleep, understood exactly what he was talking about. He worked on people, like when people came to him for mentorship, because there were young writers in Baguio who sought his guidance. He also took his mentorship so seriously. So he was like that too with his cooking. Like he didn't want like anything he made to be bad because it would be like it would speak like like poorly of him and of his skills. So if people here know what the calamansi fruit is, it's like a lemon but tiny and round, and they're hard to cut up. But like he'd cut them up and they have like a ton of seeds. But he'd cut up 10 calamansi fruits. They're that small. He'd cut them up and then patiently seed them because like you can't just use like one of those like seed extractor things like because they're too big. So like he'd just do that, and then it would like take up so much time. And then my mom and I would ask each other, why does he have to like take this too seriously? But then but yeah, and like so I think that's the reason why I became like as detailed a prose writer as I am and as detailed a cook as I am. Like my repertoire is still very limited, but whatever I make, like I hope like it comes out like.
Do you do the
well.
same thing with the calamansi, or do you use vinegar?
It depends, like because I can't find calamansi here,
Can
unfortunately.
you find calamansi in Vegas?
Oh,
There we go.
all right. So I'm mistaken. Like I mean, I've seen Mexican limes, like there's that small, but like, are they calamansi? Yeah, they're not as good. I agree.
Wait, you can use a key lime instead of calamansi?
Yes and no. It's not as. Yeah, like I recently
Can you get it at Seafood City?
probably like I recently discovered this like calamansi soy sauce combination at Seafood City. So I use that and it's good. So well, like we find remedies. Like I keep thinking about, and this is something I write about in my essay about how like Filipinos when they go abroad make do with what they have. Yeah, and that's what my father also had to do, and that's what he told me that like when you go away, you don't like calamansi isn't like as freely available, so you have to make do with limes, and it's not as good, but it'll still connect you to where you're from. And like, well, one of the reasons why I read this essay, Becoming a Writer, is that I wanted to show people an immigrant father who decides to bring his family back to the Philippines because he worries that his child may not know who he is and where he's from unless he literally brings his child back. And that's when I truly got to know him as a person, because here in America, like I knew him to be an immigrant who like felt like I mean, he was like a fluent in English, but he became a different person when he was like just speaking in English with people. But when he was hanging out with his barkada or his group of writer friends in the Philippines, he was truly himself. And I didn't see that side of him until we came home. Yeah. So yeah, like going to your question about Pix Picard, that Pix Picard was a landscape artist in Baguio, made like very evocative and haunting portraits of Burnham Park in Baguio City. And he was my dad's best friend in Baguio. And apart from talking about art and poetry, he also let my dad come to his art studio and just write poetry in the afternoon. Apart from that, they would like sit around for hours talking about food. And like and the thing about men is that like I think it's especially Filipino men is that it's hard for them to like be open about their emotions, but at the same time like Filipino men can like be super talkative, and this was like one of the ways for them to bond without telling each other I love you, man. Like it's just like talking about food, and like they like sometimes it would be like the different ways of making salmon, or like, and then like, oh, you like, do you put cheese on it? And then like, just like rhapsodize about like how like the cheese would make like the fish moist. And it was
I
just
love how
funny.
food is sort of a
Yeah.
conduit for those sort of things. It's
Yeah.
like a safe way to sort of talk about like emotional and cultural issues and
Yes.
things like that.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about this was actually a time in the book when I sort of had chills. Your father had just died, and it was a surprise. Am I correct? It was not expected. He was not
No.
sick beforehand. And in the fridge, he had made pancit. You can tell everyone what pancit is. And
Yeah, you're in like you live in Las Vegas. You know what pancit is like.
and there's a lot of pancit in Vegas. Am I correct? There's a
Yeah.
lot of pancit in Vegas, right? But
Yes. Yes. And at
Um,
home. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
in the story, this is true. He had made before he had died. He had made pancit, and he had put leftovers in the fridge, and Monica finds them, and just there's something about this idea of him feeding you after he's gone. And I really had chills reading it.
Yeah.
Like because I can imagine just as a mother myself, what it would like just how my children might experience that. So if you could just talk about that. I just thought it was really powerful.
Oh, thank you. It was fun to write that section of that essay, and at the same time, it made me cry because it brought me back to those days after my father's funeral. We were just unmoored, me and my mom, because we didn't expect this. We didn't see this coming, and so my dad was also like the cook in our family. So we like were left with like not knowing what to do, like about food. Like, I mean, I did cook. I was living in New Zealand at the time, and then I went back to the Philippines for his funeral, but I didn't know how to manage the household. And like, it was just like, so anyway, like I was like rooting around the like fridge for leftovers or like, leftover vegetables that I could turn into a meal. And I found his pancit in the Tupperware. Like it filled the Tupperware. And I was shocked that like, and it was fresh, which, I mean, he didn't expect this to happen. He just made it and then he died. So like this was the one full meal that was in our fridge, and I decided to just eat it. I tasted it. It still tasted fine. And my mom and I had it. And I almost felt as if he had just gone on a trip and had like and was coming back anyway. He felt so present in that moment. Like I know that other people would be like, "Oh, like a dead person cooked this, like I'm not going to eat it." But like he wasn't dead to me. And he's still not dead to me. He lives here, he lives here, he lives here. So, yeah, like it makes me think about, and like there was an interviewer who asked me this question a few weeks ago about how like physical objects transport us to like other states of being. Like I keep thinking about this course I took up in college on the American transcendentalists, and how like objects were meant to be access points to like the spiritual and the otherworldly. And so like the pancit, my father's pancit served that function and like showed me how immortal he was. Yeah.
That's really beautiful. It's still one of my favorite parts of the book.
Thank you.
I still get chills thinking about it. So there are a couple of instances throughout the book. Let's go back to this one. Home is a big theme in your essays, and you write about living in the U.S. and the Philippines and New Zealand and being at home and not at home in those places. Can you talk a bit about longing for home, and then also that itch that happens when you do get home? Just your relationship to all of those things.
Right. Thank you for that question. So, I think that my like constant state of unsettledness comes from the fact that like I spent my formative years in the US. I was born in the Philippines. I spent my formative years in the States believing, as my father taught me, that the Philippines was home, and then finally coming home and feeling that this wasn't quite home anymore. So, throughout my childhood and young adulthood, I kept yearning to come back to the States and just feeling that like Baguio was limiting for me. Although I was like mistaken in feeling that way, because you can live in a small town where there aren't any bookstores, but you can still somehow have a large life. Like my father, like he came from a small town called Zamboanga in the south of the Philippines, and he still read a lot. Like he read a lot of books from secondhand bookstores, like very dated.
If you haven't read her piece is it in
Lit Hub? Yeah.
In Lit Hub about secondhand bookstores and her father's relationship to them, and I mean it's fucking beautiful. So just read it. So look it up.
But like anyway, like I felt that like I wanted to get out. But when I finally got into an MFA program in Texas and like went there at the age of 23, I felt that like I wanted to go home when I got there. Like, yeah, just Baguio felt like home in a way that it did not to me previously when I was like stuck in Baguio. And well, like of course, like I went to college in Manila, but yeah, so back to that question, like different places have ended up becoming homes to me, including Las Vegas. Like I just need to spend time and like make friends, form those relationships.
Do you feel at home here?
Very much. Yeah. Yeah, thanks to the wonderful people, many of whom are here tonight. Yeah.
So this is one of my also favorite parts. See, I'm only asking questions about like my super favorite parts. Sorry. But there's how many people have read the book in here? Have it, like read? Okay, so there's this great part. It's not great. It's actually crushing, where Monica has been treated very poorly by her landlady, who is extremely cheap in New Zealand, and she didn't want you to use her spices, and she was overcharging Monica. And so this little battle happens in the kitchen over the spices. And Monica writes, "My landlady wasn't at home when I returned, and I used her condiments liberally as I cooked my dinner, hoping that the generous dashes of salt, pepper, and chili would help me recoup what she was overcharging me." I have to say, I like put my head back and just laughed hilariously at that. And this theme also comes into play in a much more serious way after your father dies, where you're using cooking as a way to sort of be defiant in the face of his absence, right? So, can you tell everyone a bit about these small acts of defiance and how maybe they allow us to have some control in these really uncontrollable, awful situations?
Yeah, I'm glad you liked that landlady essay, even if like, oh God, like it was. I had just arrived in New Zealand. I didn't like. She was somebody. My program administrator like found for me. Like I didn't know where to stay at the time, so I was like, oh, I'll just stay at this lady's house. Like she said that like it was a self-contained unit and I could use her kitchen, and she was like super nice at first. Like I mean, cloyingly so until things started turning, which was like maybe 3 days late after I arrived. So anyway, yeah, you'll get to read it. But but anyway, yeah, I found out that what she was charging me for a room was what people would normally charge for an like a self-contained apartment unit in New Zealand with its own kitchen. So I was like, this is fucked up. And apart from that, like, yeah, and so yeah, it was funny. Like so like you read the part where like I'm using liberal dashes of like pepper and salt, but when she comes back, and like she'd come in and then she'd like be like, "Did you use my condiments?" And I'd be like, "No." And then like she'd go, and then she'd go, and then she'd go out, and then I'd be like, "Ah, like more, more cayenne here." So anyway, but yeah, like I'm thinking about how well in like the current moment they talk about how like little acts of resistance help, like even if they don't make a dent in like how like things are being run right now, they still help you preserve your self-worth, which is very important. And even with and like okay, like very abrupt change in topic, but like with my father dying, like as I said in the collection, cooking became an act of defiance too, because that's how I maintained a connection with him, even if people in the Philippines were telling me, he's gone, get over it, you have to accept it. Like, just like, yeah, like, I'm not going to make like broad generalizations of my culture because everybody's different. But on the other hand, like there's something to be said about how grief is handled in the Philippines, and how like you're expected to get over it and go back to work. And that's not like unique to Filipino culture, because when I went back to New Zealand, people were telling me, so like did you have fun after burying your dad? Like it was just so absurd. And like somebody was asking me, oh, now that you're back, can you read my manuscript and get back to me with feedback? Like no, I don't feel like, yeah. So like people are just really insensitive, and like wherever you go, yeah, I'm sorry.
Well, actually, this actually sets us up well for the question about Catherine Mansfield, who's a New Zealand author, and her piece, The Aloe, which you read during the pandemic. And at the time, you were surrounded by a lot of death and despair and suffering. And this is a quote from that story about memory. The story taunts mortality by showing us what death cannot fully take away. Death hovers on the periphery, but does not bring the story, with all its disparate and fascinating characters, to a complete pause. I wonder if you feel this way about your father's death, that it didn't bring his life to a complete pause, that his fascinating and transcendent character has impact in the book, here, in the world.
Well, he lives in me, and he's the one reason why I kept writing, even if I felt paralyzed and lost after he died. I felt that like the only way through this is by following the light he continues to shine for me despite his absence. And how did I find that light? Like he wasn't physically present anymore, so I had to like dig deep within myself, and writing enabled me to do that. And he had to do that for himself too when he grieved the passing of his own father, when he grieved like the inevitable losses that we all have to endure through life. That's how like a lot of his poems, come to think of it now, were elegies. Yeah, so like for um friends he had lost contact with, or friends who had died in shipwrecks in the Philippines. Like back in the 70s and 80s, there were a lot of shipwrecks, like a lot of like ship sinking. So, yes. Yeah. So, yeah. And people like, I mean, cousins who like died at a young age. So, yeah, like I guess I got that from him. Like, his desire to keep the past alive in him. And like this is something that I've been thinking about, like especially after reading Proust. Like I've like decided to read Proust because I have so much time as a Shearing fellow. So I so I so I was I read the first volume of Remembrance of Things Past, and I keep thinking about how Proust doesn't really see the past as something that's behind him, but something that continues to live in us, and well, I mean, exists in the present time and like informs our present. And we keep thinking about like time as this linear thing when it's not. So I guess like my dad exists in the dream time now. Yeah.
I feel like he's here with us, you know. I
Yeah.
feel like, you know. How are we on time? I just want to make sure. I'm not sure where. Can I? Okay, I'm just gonna. I've got. Okay, good. I'm good. Okay. Okay. So let's go to. Um, okay. So I also love this other essay called James, which is a short piece about a boy you knew and then lost who was a foster child, and when you look for him later, you write, what feels more real is your impish grin, your dark eyes laughing, brightening the room of memory. And I just love that, the room of memory phrase. And so much of your writing in these essays is about learning to live with memory, the memories of your father, the Philippines, the way memory comes to life in the practical and everyday through cooking. You talk about your grandparents and the tango. Making pancit. How do you pronounce it?
Pansit.
Pancit.
Like
Okay.
it doesn't matter.
Okay. What does memory mean to you, and how does it sort of propel you forward and connect you to home and the things that are important?
So, the stronger the memories I have, like the more I know that the places to which these memories belong are my homes. So, Delaware, which is where I met James as a child, is another home, and it's the memory of him that connects me to that home, even if he's not. I'm not sure if he's there anymore. I don't know where he is. Yeah, he was lost to the foster system, unfortunately. But so home is Delaware, home is New Zealand, but at the same time, because memories are things that we can carry with us, like home is something I carry with me too. Yeah. So it tethers me to like physical places, but it also enables me to understand what like the experiences that have made me. And like by honoring those memories, I'm honoring who I am as a person and the people who have shaped me, including my landlady. Sorry, but like, but I like the thing is that like that ended up being a long essay because like I had a long list of grievances with her, but
You were definitely like, I was like, Do not screw this up, Kim, because Monica is going to write a story about this if you do.
Oh yeah, like my mom tells me that I have a memory of an elephant. So like, so
Priscilla's in the audience, so
Yeah, my-
and Mama's here. So.
she flew here all the way from Baguio. So, yeah. Yeah, just to attend. Yeah, because this is like my dad book. But anyway, yeah, like so back to memory. Um, yeah, I guess. Yeah, like but when I put down like all of my grievances with my landlady after writing the essay, like I forgot all about her. Like so I was reading it again. I was like, oh, holy fuck, this is like so fucked up.
Love it.
Yeah.
Okay, so you write. Okay, this is the last line in the book. Sorry, you guys are going to have to deal with my spoiler. You write about your father. I am his echo, communing with the echoes of everything he once saw. Right? What does it mean to you to write a book that includes your father's actual poetry, his actual words?
Right. So I wrote a blog post about this for Northwestern University Press, and it came out today, but I didn't share it yet because there was so much coming out. But anyway, I talk about how when I sat down to write the rest of this collection during the pandemic, like I was stuck at home in the Philippines with my mom, couldn't get out. So like what happened was that I ended up turning back to the past because nothing was happening with my life. So I started like writing or working on this collection in Honest and like wanting to write like an essay I'd like wanted to write for years about my grandparents who were the tango dancing champions of Zamboanga before World War II. And because like I ended up learning to tango in New Zealand years and years afterwards. But I like because I didn't really know them as tango dancers, I had never seen them dance tango. Like I I needed a guide to like into the past, and my father had written a poem about them being tango dancers. So his poetry served as like guides for me, whether like it was back into the past or towards the future, because like he also wrote about like what will happen to this city when we're gone. Like what he also wrote about birds that visited our yard and like seemed to keep watch on this sapling, this like guava tree sapling that he had planted in our front yard. So like these poems were guides for me, and I was like, by writing around his poetry, I was allowing him to like guide me forwards this collection. Yeah, thank you.
It also really connects you to the past too. So like there's
Yes.
this
Yeah.
it feels like this. So we're gonna do something really special. Since Monica is his echo, and we thought it would be really great to end this part of the program with words with her father's poetry. So she's going to read something from her father's
Right.
poems.
Thank you. Thank you, Kim, for thinking of this. It's like, yeah.
He would be so proud of you right now.
Yeah. I'll try not to cry. So, right. Thank you. But this is a poem that I included in an essay called My Father and William Butler Yeats, because my dad was a Yeats fan. It's titled Via Air, and it's about him going to his own father's wake. On my way to your wake, Father, I let my thoughts fall toward you down there, where, in a final absolute patience, you wait or do not wait. Up here, more than a world subsists. Moist behemoths, sprouted from spores of the ocean, rise and arrogate space. I'll wager these are built by elfin hands, frantic and numberless. As I gain the upper air, the white masses become a highway with no end in sight. There's no way of knowing, Father, how all that water and air are held together, seemingly with so much love, fragile and vast.
Wow. This is beautiful.